is everyone, I suppose everyone's able to see my screen, is that correct? All right, thanks everyone. I'm Rachel Saliba. I'm a senior researcher at the Center for Lebanese Studies, and it's really a privilege, and I'm so happy to be joining you today. One, to learn from everyone, but also to present some of the work that we have been doing at the Center for Lebanese Studies as part of the GPE KIX project on education system resilience. So what I'll be presenting today is going to be some of the work that we've done over the past year on education system resilience in 5 GPE MENA regions, which are Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Yemen. And what I'll be presenting today is going to be is a mixture of what we've done in terms of a report we have produced, a blog post, and a policy brief, which can be found on the GPE KIX website or the Center for Lebanese Studies website. But before we move into some of the findings that we have done in our research, I think it's important to kind of present what we have done in terms of methodology and what kind of data we have looked at. So first of all, what we did was we did a context analysis, a desk review and a content analysis of the education strategies and plans that the Ministry of Education of those 5 countries have produced over the past 15 years. So one, we have started looking at, the education policies and strategies as of 2011 up until 2025. And the reason we chose a cutoff point of 2011 is because in the MENA region, that's when the Arab Spring began to happen. And what we did was we wanted to look and see where does resilience or how is resilience present in those strategies and plans. So we looked at all of those strategies and plans, and we assessed the presence of resilience against the conceptual framework of Cameron and Al on education system resilience. And I won't go into the details of what the framework looks into, but just briefly, it looks at whether the system is working, or the plan is actually working to strengthen the system, if it is aiming to anticipate or plan against any future crises or disruptions, to kind of understand whether they respond, how they respond and recover from crises, how they prevent and mitigate crises or disruptions. And of course, there's GESI, which is gender equality and social inclusion, is a cross-cutting theme across all of these. So this is generally what we were looking into. And now to the main findings. There are quite a few, so I'm just going to share just a couple of those. The first one is the emergence of resilience as a donor-driven language. So though this research study started looking at the data as of 2011, however, we have noticed that the content analysis shows that the concept of resilience only began to appear really prominently in those education strategies and plan only following COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was really interesting because the literature also shows that this largely coincides with the increased use of the term resilience by international donor communities. And our findings suggest that the term was often incorporated or included in those plans and strategies simply to align with donor priorities and to satisfy donor requests, given that the funding is really largely dependent on this alignment. So while resilience was present in strategies and plan, but in fact, there is very little evidence, except for a few exceptions, of course, of meaningful implementation of those plans and strategies. So in practice, resilience was found in those strategies, but not really translated into action, not really implemented. So this really highlights how the planning processes of these education strategies and plans are often externally oriented, simply designed to satisfy donor expectations, rather than guide any internal and country-level effective reform. And what was also really interesting was that, we live in the MENA region and Arabic is the spoken language, or the spoken language mostly. But it was really interesting. Sorry, I don't know if, all right, I'm going to go ahead and continue. What was interesting was that some of those plans and strategies that we looked at were only written in English, which really says a lot about who those plans are actually targeting. And as a result, resilience has become kind of a buzzword which people use without that avoids addressing any kind of structural challenges or enabling any kind of substantive changes. And what we've noticed is that when donor funding ends or shifts, which is quite often over the past few years, the strategies that are tied to that funding are rarely sustained. And this really creates a vicious circle of short-term planning without any long-term kind of transformation within the education system. So this really raises a critical question that when resilience is included in those national agendas, what does it actually mean and who is it meant to serve? Are they actually meant to serve the people within the country, the local education system, or simply just donors? Secondly, we're going to talk a little bit about contextualizing the term resilience in terms of language and meaning. I'm sure there are quite a few people here from the MENA region, and I'm sure you know that there really isn't an exact translation for the term resilience. So there isn't a one-word term and specific term to translate the word resilience. Instead, it's translated in multiple ways, but most commonly, the two terms that are usually used are muruna, which means being flexible or being adapted, having adaptability, or sumud, which refers to really resistance and steadfastness. But those two terms really carry very different political and social meanings. So our research indicates that in the MENA region, resilience is often understood and enacted in terms of muruna, where we see people or the system kind of coping with existing structural constraints and adapting to crises rather than actually questioning and transforming the systems that produce vulnerabilities that lead people to be resilient. So this adaptation focused framing really risks normalizing harmful and unjust conditions instead of addressing what actually needs to be changed. But when we look at Sumud on the other hand, Sumud reflects a more transformative understanding of resilience, one rooted in resistance, in endurance, in collective agency, and simply put, where we're not accepting the status quo, we are not simply adapting to crises and to the systems that result in vulnerabilities, but we are actually resisting the system in order to transform the system and address the core issues that lead to vulnerabilities and inequalities. So grounding the concept of resilience in locally meaningful terms to the country, to the region, to the context, and its priorities is really essential to genuinely strengthening the education system rather than reinforcing the status quo. And then finally, my final slide is about really one of the findings of the study is how we shift, or there's a need to shift from emergency thinking of crises to long-term system building. So crises are often treated or thought of as exceptional events, like one-time events, something that happens for a short period of time and it ends. What we have noticed, I would say around the world, but more particularly within the MENA region, that crises are not just a one-time event, they're persistent, they're reoccurring in many contexts. So if we take Lebanon, for example, where I'm based, over just the past 7 years, and not to discuss all the previous years before, but just over the past 7 years, we have had compounded crises since 2019. So we've had the economic collapse, the financial collapse of the banking system. We have had COVID-19. We have had the Beirut blast, the 2024, and then most recently, the 2026 wars. So these are really, we cannot look at the system as just a one-time crisis rather than something which is reoccurring and persistent. Consequently, if resilience, with the way it is currently understood, risks being reduced to really a short-term crisis management. We talk about resilience where we talk about, okay, we need to, crisis management, and we need to deal with crises, which aims to simply absorb shock in order to stabilize the system or keeping the status quo rather than transform them. Therefore, the scope of resilience must extend beyond being ready for the upcoming crisis or the upcoming emergency, just being prepared to that, rather than think of equitable development over the long term and conducting some kind of education structural reform. And this really requires rethinking resilience, not just as a temporary one-time event activated during emergencies where we have to go into crisis mode and deal with it, but rather as a long-term approach embedded in the overall system design, and then addressing the education system and addressing those crises need to be thought of in terms of long-term in order to address those long-term and compounded crises. So I'm going to end here for now, and I'm sure we're going to have some more time for questions and answers. But yeah, thank you for now.
I'm here.
Oh, yes, I was.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for such an inspiring presentation, and really going in depth into the concept of resilience, and whether it's moruna or adaptability or survival. I mean, it's really very significant to talk about the resilience as a concept. So before we move on to another presentation, I would like to open the floor for discussion and reflections and insights. I mean, this has been very inspiring from Rachel about system resilience in MENA countries, in many countries, and I know that we have now representations from different countries. So if you would like to share your thoughts or reflections on what you've heard, so please, the floor is yours. Just raise your hand so as we can unmute you. Yes, Muhammad Asim, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible? Hello.
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. It is very good presentation, and it is really enjoyable experience to learn from our colleague. Actually, my question is a little bit tricky. That why, when the Rachel was presenting, I was thinking that why system is maintaining the status quo rather than transforming it. What evidence she has right now, and what her strategy for the future? That's my question.
Shall I go ahead?
Yes, please, Rachel, you can respond to that, and then we can take a question from Jamila. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Muhammad, for your question. I think it's really quite interesting. So I'm going to take Lebanon as a context because this is the country where I'm at, and we're still in the middle of a crisis in 2026. So one thing when we talk about resilience, and there's been a lot of discussions recently that yes, the education system in Lebanon is resilient. Yes, education has continued. Yes, for example, people are still learning online. But the question is, when we want to talk about resilience, we want to talk, okay, things are continuing as normal, but at what cost? Right? At this point, you look at education in Lebanon, half of the students are learning online who do not have enough devices, who are living in schools and in shelters, who do not have internet connectivity. They are literally living in a war zone. So when you want to talk about resilience, you cannot kind of say it's a one size fits all, because what we are currently living in Lebanon and what we're seeing in terms of resilience, no, we do not have a resilient system at the moment, because the cost of it, and over the past 7 years, we are currently conducting a research on the impact of the 7 years of conflicts on Lebanon and the education system, you might say, yes, we have continued education over the past 7 years, but you can look at the quality of education, what kind of quality of education these students are getting. The results in their exams is just astonishing, where you see people who are not able to continue to their next grade. Some of them are considering dropping out completely out of the education system in order to continue, vocational training, or they are unable to cope because of those lasting years. So what I'm trying to say is that you cannot look at resilience only as one aspect. Okay, we do have official examinations. Great, we have a resilient system. No, we have to look at the overall impact of all of those crises across the years and how they have impacted teachers, how they have impacted students, parents, etc. So I feel like you cannot look at just one criteria in terms of determining whether a system is resilient or not, but rather over the overall impact of those compounded crises. If we wanted to just answer your second part of the question in terms of what the future holds or how to change the future, I'm going to quote one principal which I interviewed who lives in the north of Lebanon. And she said, if we continue, we are currently living in survival mode within the education system in Lebanon. And if the system continues the way it is right now without really drastic changes to the education system as a whole, we are really in fear of the complete collapse of the education system. So I feel like at this point, of course, there are short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies and plans that one can do, but really it has to be a transformation of the entire system rather than just addressing bits and pieces here and bits and pieces there just to keep things stabilized. So I hope I answered your question, Muhammad.
Yes,
Thank you so much,
yes,
Rachel.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and yes, I agree with you. Like in times of conflict, it's not that easy to be as responsive as expected and so on. Do we have, we had another hand, I guess. Jamila, do you want to come in? Yes, Jamila, please. Can you unmute, please, Jamila? Uh,
Yeah, I think now I'm unmuted. Yes, I was asking like the question that from Rachel, that when she did the document review of all the policies or papers and documents, which framework did she use to identify that whether there is, or it was the word resilience when it appeared? Like what informed? Yeah.
Sure, it was both. It was actually looking at the term resilience, but also as I presented at the beginning, I'm not sure if you caught that, Jamila. So we assessed it against Cameron et al.'s education system resilience framework, which looks at how those plans actually strengthen the system, how they anticipate and plan against future crises, how they prevent or recover and prevent and mitigate across that specific framework. So that's mainly how we looked at it. And within every plan, we actually analyze it against that framework, and then we came up with those conclusions for every country.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Rachel. And I would like to encourage you all to continue asking questions in the chat. And then maybe if more questions would arise, we would ask Rachel to come back with an answer at the end of this session. And I would now share our lovely poster. So, and I would like to remind you is to have the coffee or the drink in hand, so as you'd be like enjoying the session over a tasty drink. And now we would move on to another wonderful presentation. We would, fasten your seatbelt because we're going to travel from MENA all the way to Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh, we would be now listening to a presentation about building futures, using metaphors and values to tell a story on early childhood development in Bangladesh. So, I mean, from bombs and armed conflicts and things like that, we would go to a paradise where we would relax and talk about metaphors and storytelling and for early childhood development. So I would like to ask Fardous Khanum and Sarah Sarwar. Fardous Khanum is a senior lecturer and ECD academic lead at BRAC IED, Barak University in Bangladesh. And also Sarwat is a curriculum specialist at the same organization, Barak IED, Barak University in Bangladesh. So I would now stop the share and ask you to start your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Rasha, for the wonderful introduction. And I also would like to thank you for inviting us to share our research work with all of you. So I hope that you will enjoy that. Sarah, can you please go to the slide mode? So me and my colleague Sarwat, as Dr. Rasha has already introduced, will be presenting. So hello, everyone. Sarwat, please go to the slide mode, Sarwat. No, it's not yet slide mode. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So today, basically, we'll be sharing a very interesting research findings. It's a long story, but we'll try to make it short. But I hope, Dr. Rasha, you will allow us some time to share our stories, because this research really requires kind of sharing the context, then methodology, and then, of course, we'll be sharing our findings. So that requires a little bit of time as well. So I hope that we'll be able to share.
Yes, dear. The idea is to tease them where they would go and look for more materials and more links and more reports on your website. So we're now at the teasing phase, where to create this eagerness to follow up with you more. So, and this is why, excuses if the time is so tight today. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. The presentation on building future using metaphor and values to tell a story of early childhood development in Bangladesh is a really summary of the second phase research that we started back in 2017, the first phase. So today we'll be sharing the second phase one. So next slide, Sarwat. Yes, this research is really was a collaboration between Frameworks Institute and the BRAC Institute of Education and Development, BRAC University. And Frameworks is a kind of a non-profit think tank based. They are based in Washington, D.C. And we are working in Bangladesh, and we are a university where we really try to design the scalable solution for the change that are responsive to the needs and desire of the community. And Frameworks, they really work to strengthen the communications capacities of the other nonprofit as they work to improve the public discourse about any issues and scientific concepts. Next slide, Sarat. So as I was sharing that there was two phases of research. So first phase we really, which took place from 2017 to 2019, and there we really tried to see the communication landscape and the cultural model of the people of Bangladesh around ECD. So, and based on the findings that we found in first phase, we really, wanted to conduct the second phase of the research, where we would develop and test communication tools, strategies to see which one would could most effectively bridge the gaps identified and the and to help the ECD sector communicate more effectively the ECD messages in Bangladesh. Sarat, next slide. Go to the next slide, Sarat. Yeah. So just a little bit, I would like to share the findings of first phase, because that will help you to understand what we really did in the second phase. So in the first phase research, we found some important overlaps with the science of ECD that experts has already proven. So, and we also found some gaps as well. So in terms of the overlaps, we found that, the people who were interviewed or who we talked to were thinking about an understanding of ECD in ways that aligned with the expert understanding. For example, like people generally understood the importance of basic inputs like nutrition, hygiene, safety for young children. They understood how poverty can undermine development, and then they also talked about early years, in some way, the importance of early years intervention. They also talked about the government roles in this context, and also they had a little bit of idea about the powerful way of play that has a significant, impact on children's development. So next slide. In terms of the gap, as I have said, that we found overlaps and then gaps with the science of ECD. So we identified some key gaps where we see that people's thinking was not aligned with the experts or the science of ECD. For example, people often undervalued the importance of. You can see from here, it's a very brief, summary that we have brought here. That they really, often undervalued the importance of the early years skills that really is important for the later life development. So, and we instead of giving emphasis on the early years, they often focus on the school years as the time when real learning begins. That's they perceive. Then we also saw that they had lack of understanding about emotional and brain development. Then they talked about childcare center as a place to keep young child clean, well-fed, safe, but not the potential center for early learning and stimulation. So so based on these, we really establish the research objective for the phase 2. So Sarat, go to the next slide. Yes, so the based on those findings, we really try to kind of set up our objective for the phase 2, which was to build a framing strategy that could be shared across the ECD sector and strengthen their collective capacity as a storyteller. So, and we really, began this work in July 2023, and we completed it in October 2025. So next slide, please, Sarat. Yeah. So why do strategic framing research? Because, communicating about scientific topic like ECD is not always straightforward or simple. So people do not, perceive information as a blank slate. They use their pre-existing understanding, which is grounded in their culture, to really interpret any information or messages. So because of that, having a deeper understanding of how people think about the topic can allow us to be more strategic and effective in framing our messages. It's really important. And when it's done well, strategic framing can enhance public knowledge, shift their attitude, and build support for social changes. Next slide, please, Sarah. So we use some frame elements. So what exactly the framing is? So the simple definition is, it is the practice of choosing how we present information, and then of course, when we present information, we have lots of framing choices to make. But for research, or for this research, we actually selected two. As you can see here, one is metaphor and then other one is values. Next slide, Sarat. So why we selected metaphor? Because, frameworks, they had huge experience to really, conduct research in collaboration with Harvard Center on Developing Child. They found that a good metaphor can be a very powerful translation device. It can make something that is unfamiliar or difficult to understand by comparing it to something that is more concrete and familiar. For example, here you can see that comparing a building of child's, brain to the building of a house can open up a new and clear ways of understanding early brain development. So in this process, a good metaphor can shift people, away from the problematic understanding and help their thinking become more accurate and complete. So next slide, Sarat. Yeah, next, you can go to the next one. So as I said that we also use some values. So then why values? We believe that values are a fundamental part of good messaging and framing. So because they really provide an organizing principle for any story you are telling. So they function as kind of a bit of like anchor holding the story together. So it's a very powerful tool that we can use to tell any story, to convince policymaker to invest for early childhood development or any other issues. So next one, Sarwat. So now I will talk about a little bit the research kind of methodology that we use for our second phase research. So we conducted on the street interview. We conducted PDS session. It's a kind of focus group discussion session. Then we also conduct a two-wave control experiment. So I'm not going to talk about all those details. I hope that if you have any question, I would be happy to respond to that later on. So next slide, Sarwat. So here you can see that over the years, framework has tested many different kinds of values and metaphor across the project they have worked in different countries. So for this project in Bangladesh, we explored how some of the metaphor which were tested in other locations might be contextualized and found effective in Bangladesh too. So here you can see that we tested brain architecture, serve and return, weaving skill rope, resilience scale. I was hearing from resilience, Rachel regarding the resilience scale, and toxic stress. So, and it was not kind of straightforward thing. We did lots of work to contextualize it. For example, for brain building, brain architecture in Bangla, it was, I mean, mostiske nirman, but if I translated it would be brain building. So like sovereign return, we came up with a translation in Bangla, like playing catch. So, and we invested a lot to really contextualize those metaphors. And then, Sarat, can you click? And next, yes. So we also identified a specific set of values we hypothesized that might have a resonance and meaning for Bangladeshis. So yes, Sarah, can you please click here? Yes, you can see here that how serve and return, we contextualize it as playing catch. So it's just an example. So next slide, Sarah. Yeah, here you can see that, I mean, under each theme, there are 4 themes. So under each theme, we tested some values and some metaphors. And we found, can you click now? Yes, these frames perform the best in our context. So my colleague Sarwat now will talk about some recommendation of this research. Sarwat, over to you. Sarwat, unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Thank you so much. I actually needed to be unmuted. Thank you so much, Appa. So after our research, using all the, peer discourse sessions and all the interviews, we actually came up with some of the recommendations, as Appa has said. So one was to use the value of national progress to talk about why investment in early childhood matters for the nation, because we have seen that this value, we have seen that this value increases support for idea that the early childhood development is not something that should be restricted to families and to the child only, but it is something that matters for the whole nation, and a child can actually progress further and contribute to the nation. So when we utilized this framework for this value, it actually increased the understanding on the importance of early childhood development for our participants. And many participants actually reorganized their thinking regarding national progress and early childhood development. So this value helped to increase the support for the idea that it is not just the responsibility of the family, but it goes beyond families towards communities and also towards governments on a more policy level, decision-making level, to improve the outcomes for young children. And it connected broad aspirations like national progress to concrete investments at the community level. The idea was that if children actually were given the proper foundations and the proper tools that they required in the early stages, so early investment, they can contribute later, they can be contributing citizens of the country. So this grand, broad aspiration actually helped participants understand and reframe the role of their own role regarding early childhood development in Bangladesh. And using the value of equal opportunities for all to talk about how Bangladesh can improve outcomes for all its children, including those most vulnerable. So in Bangladesh, our country is also marked by systemic forms of discrimination regarding class and creed and community, othering, marginalization. So this value actually drew attention to inequality and marginalization, how some children in some communities are not being given or are deprived of the benefits that other children from other communities might receive. So this idea that early childhood development, equal opportunities in the early years is for all, it is in our constitution, but it is not being strengthened or mandated. It is not being strengthened or mandated in community levels or even in national levels. So it draws attention to this inequality, and it also broadens the sense of responsibility for ECD outcomes for all children and all communities, and the role that governments can play to strengthen this, to make sure that no child is left behind, is further strengthened. And we have seen this to be a very powerful value, because it encompasses all other values like shared responsibilities, national progress. And so it supports communicators in making a case for ECD interventions for those children who are most out of reach. So this was these two values were very powerful values. Even in our quantitative analysis, we have seen that equal opportunities for all fared the highest in regards to the statistical coefficients and then national progress. So we see that there is a very strong connection where even whether it's qualitative analysis or quantitative, we see that these two values are very strongly integrated in our Bangladeshi ethos. So then if we go to the metaphors, our recommendation would be to use the metaphor of brain building to communicate about the foundational importance of the earliest months and years of children's lives. So initially, as Firdousi Appa mentioned, that we changed the name from brain architecture to brain building because it was easier for people of all communities and backgrounds to understand it. So when we before applying the metaphor, when we first mentioned about child development and brain development, it was a very shallow understanding we have seen. Most of them talked about the importance of nutrition and that, yes, brain, yes, it's important, but it's not really, they couldn't explain why or what was the reason for it. But when we use the metaphor, the change was immediate. We saw that they actually understood the concept that brain building, like a house, if we talk about how a house is being built from foundation to pipes to walls and then to the roof, and how it creates a solid foundation creates a solid house. When we use that metaphor, we saw that they understood that just like that, actually critical brain development in the early months and years provides a foundation for later life and for later growth. So this focus on critical brain development was very important. The change was very obvious, the change in their framing, and it reinforced the idea that healthy brains don't develop automatically, and it doesn't develop only during the school age. So that idea of aging up, that children need to, reach school age to properly develop, that was also something that we saw that people shifted from that idea as well, and highlights the foundational role of early relationships. So nurturing care, responsive caregiving, and positive experiences and supports. Actually, this was also something that the participants have highlighted and stressed upon, that it's not just about academics, it's also about how much care and nurture a child is getting in the early years. And that also fosters brain development because the brain is very elastic during the early years. So if we have time, I don't know if we have time, I would like to just share just one little interview. It won't take too long, hopefully.
জি, তারা বেড়ে ওঠে হচ্ছে বসা শেখে বা হাঁটা শেখে, এইভাবে আস্তে আস্তে বেড়ে ওঠে।
So here we see that she's just talking about the very basic ideas of child development. But if we go later on, we see that their ideas have changed. So we see that here the man is talking about how it can be compared with building a house. So he's using the metaphor directly. Okay. So if we go to the second metaphor, we also recommend weaving skills rope. So this metaphor can be used to emphasize the integrated nature of skill development. So this highlighted that skill development is not happening in isolation. Children are not just learning language first and then social skills and then cognitive skills. All of this is happening in sync and in concert. So this metaphor, because of its familiarity, like the weaving of a rope, which in a riverine country like Bangladesh it's a very common common sight to see. So people were very familiar with this metaphor as well, that how like a rope being woven, social, emotional, and cognitive skills are also woven together and developing together in concert. And, these different strands make a rope strong. And just like that, the social, emotional, and cognitive skills woven together developing together also creates a child that is resilient, adaptable, and, holistically developed. So it points to families, that it's not just happening in sync, but families and community centers also play key roles in supporting the development of these skills together. And then we have playing catch. So playing catch, as Ferdowsi Appa mentioned, we have rephrased it to make it easier for people to understand here, because tennis is not a very common game in Bangladesh. So we have changed it to something like playing catch, where, we can show that back and forth effective interaction when a child is laughing, when a child is smiling, or even when a child is sad or crying. As adults, we have to, interact with them and give back to that and respond to those interactions. And it is not just nutrition and, feeding and sleeping that's important. Of course, those are very important, but also the fact that we are interacting with the child, we are reciprocating with them. So this back and forth and give and take, it's also important. And this metaphor showcases the importance of responsive engagement. And it can be used to emphasize the many types of interaction, like eye contact, facial expressions, gestures, babbling. And we have seen that this adapted metaphor actually helped participants to understand the importance of interaction and interacting with children. So, and how it strengthens children's early brain development. So I'm just going to, because I know we don't have much time, so I'll just skip the video. So the other recommendation we have is, our Rachel has mentioned resilience, and now more than ever in every country, resilience in children and adults is something that we want to foster. In Bangladesh as well, our country is prone to a lot of natural disasters like floods, cyclones, and landslides. So children living in these communities are prone to these disasters. So our recommendation would be to explain resilience using the resilience scale. So this metaphor emphasizes how community level supports for children and families can build resilience in children. So it is not just that, the standard idea that many people would have, that a child who has been given unfortunate circumstances has no scope to survive later on. But if we balance these negative circumstances with positive circumstances, like positive interactions, family support, community support, and government interventions, the negative factors can be offset by positive factors, and every child can get the chance and opportunity to survive. So resilience, to survive and to be resilient and become resilient individuals. So resilience is something that can be built and strengthened, and families and communities and policies will also play a key role. It is not only the child's responsibility, rather it is all the elements in a child's ecosystem that comes together and plays a very important role in offsetting the negative circumstances with positive interventions. And the value of shared responsibility to assert a national will and capacity can collectively improve outcomes for children across the nation. So like the other values, national progress and equal opportunities for all, this also resonated strongly with the public because it honed in the fact that responsibility is for everyone. It is not just for the responsibility of the child, and also of the family, but for the community, for the government to provide opportunities and build a sense of collective efficacy. And it recommends that children's healthy development is a central concern for the nation, not just for families, but for communities and for the government as well, so that there is equal opportunity for all and national progress for the nation ultimately. So early childhood development, it is everyone's responsibility. And this resonated very strongly with all the participants. So we have, these tested tools in our messaging toolboxes. We have tested.
I'm afraid the time is running up.
Okay.
Please wrap up. Thank you.
So just wanted to conclude that these these metaphors and values that we have shared, it's a toolbox that we have created, but this is not a script that we have to strictly follow. Every country, every nation has their own variation, and we can always adapt these metaphors and these values according to the needs of the nation and the community, to build understanding and support for ECD around specialized and the unique issues that every nation has. And this can be woven into a broader story to build support for concrete solutions and specific policies. A shared framing strategy ultimately increases our narrative power, which is to foster early childhood development for all children everywhere around the world. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarwat and Firdaus for this. It's not planned, but the term resilience came out many times as well. So this has been a magical combination and between the two topics without prior planning, but it's the mere coincidence that is serving the purpose. And it's really beautiful. I mean, how real science, talking about the brain and the psychology and the integration of the community and the perceptions. I mean, the interview as well was very interesting. So thank you so much for sharing this wonderful experience. I would invite the floor for any questions to our speakers today. So please, if you would like to speak, just raise your hand, and then I would unmute you for an intervention or a contribution. So I would also spotlight Rachel, and then add her to the group discussion as well from the floor. So two very important topics, resilience, specifically in times of conflicts, and early childhood education and development. So if you have any questions or reflections, or if you want to share your own country experience or information from your country, we have here people from Yemen. So if you feel that you can contribute to the report that Rachel is working on from Yemen, maybe arrange an interview later on or something. So the floor is yours now, is to get communicated and connected together.
Dr. Rasha, I saw there is a comments from Jahida Batul, if I pronounce her name correctly. So she actually commented that community parenting component needs to be adapted for early childhood development. I absolutely agree with her. And then, for that, our recommendation is that because we saw that people have some pre-existing perception regarding early childhood development. Even in some cases, they don't understand the early childhood development, the terminology. So this is why our purpose was to really, test these metaphors and values to see. The purpose of using metaphor was to really increase people's, knowledge regarding very, kind of complicated issues of early childhood development, like brain development, right? So that really helped people to switch their perception when we compare the brain building one with the house building, right? Likewise, when we use, the playing catch metaphor with the back and forth interaction. So in the parenting session, probably we can use these metaphors to really increase parents' knowledge regarding early childhood development. So, and this was our purpose, and we really, I mean, I think I saw one comments that probably from Jahida, that she is interested to have the toolkit. To respond to your question, we are developing the toolkit. We are just, I think, few more days we need to finalize the toolkit. So, and research, research report is available at our, institute website, and also Frameworks Institute's website. So you can get it from there, and toolkit will be publishing soon. So these are really helpful toolkit for the communicator to communicate their messages around the city. Yeah.
Would you kindly paste in the chat the links to your website so that people can click on it and have access to the tools and extra resources,
sure.
please?
Okay. I hope that I'll be sharing the frameworks one. Our one is at this moment under the construction for some reason, but I can share the frameworks one right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zahida.
Any further?
I actually have a question, if that's okay.
Please. Yeah, please.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you very much, ladies, for the very interesting presentation. I'm not an ECD specialist, but I'm just thinking in terms of, I mean, it's great that this has been tried out in Bangladesh, but one, I wanted to see if you've seen different responses to those toolboxes in between urban and rural areas. Like, did they deal with it differently? One, and two, has it been tried out in anywhere else besides Bangladesh? Because I feel like this is really interesting work, and I'm just thinking if this has been tried out outside of Bangladesh as well. Thank you.
Sarat? Okay, I can go. Sarat, can you please share the link? Can you please share the link so I can
I'll share the link.
Rachel's respond. Thank you, Rachel, for your, very important question. Actually, we really didn't try to see the urban-rural differences. We really wanted to see it collectively, but as a researcher, because this research was done by the researcher, like Sarwat and my other colleagues who are here, they have joined this session. We did it by ourselves, right? So we saw that even, we had a kind of perception that rural people will not be able to understand those concepts. But we are surprised to see that, when we really use the metaphor, they understood the concept. So, and in some cases, we found even the urban people don't understand. We won't be able to kind of give you any kind of concluding remarks that whether the urban people did better than the rural, or rural people did better than the urban. So it was a kind of mix from our experiences. Though we did not analyze that one, we really wanted to see collectively whether the metaphor works or not. I hope that I responded your answer. And this research was done in different countries in different ways, based on their findings that they have found in the first phase. That means when they explore the perception of people around the ECD. So like in our country, we saw that people had very shallow model of early, the brain development and emotional development of the children. So this is why, we tested this metaphor to see whether this metaphor can really help to shift their perception.
Thank you very much for those. And then I can see hands up from Jamila. Jamila, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It was very interesting research from Bangladesh. I was just thinking that maybe it is outside the scope of your research, but did you link you have shared that there was variation in understanding among the participants on the ECD and brain development. Did you link this understanding with any outcomes for children that where it was better understanding, what was its impact or its effect on any child related outcomes, or you're planning some future research on that? Because that would also be interesting, that if the community or parents where they have better understanding, how it is translating into better outcomes for children. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, it's a very good question, you know. So, as a part of our research, we really try to see whether this, metaphor and values works to really shape people mindset, and also to really convince people to invest for the early childhood development. But to respond to your question, actually, this is a part of, implementation research that we expect that any organization will be using the toolkit, and then we can also see that whether that can help to really have the better child developmental outcome. So probably, we can have the third phase of this research where we can see that would be interesting. But to respond to your question, recently we are planning to do one more study, not on ECD, but on the education, quality education, and there we have planned that we'll be doing the three phases, like the implementation phase, the perception phase, that's been the descriptive one, then to test the frame element, and then also to see the implementation research. Unfortunately, for the ECD one, we didn't get chance to see the implementation part of it. But if any in organization they do implement, then we'd be happy to do the implementation research.
Thank you very much, and let me challenge your minds a bit. So if you are from South Asia and you want to think of applying the same education system resilience into South Asia countries, how different it's going to be. Imagine, and vice versa. If people from MENA are to adopt the methodology and the approach from early childhood into their context, what would be the changes to suit the Arab world and the MENA region? So it's like to think out of the box and get the discussion and think of a policy transfer. So how to transfer policies across sub-regions as well. So what do you think?
All right, I'll try to go. So thinking about, I know ladies have mentioned, resilience, and it was very interesting that they were talking about, personal resilience, the resilience of the child, the resilience of the parent, the resilience of the community. What we have been doing in our study was more on the policy and the government and the ministries level, and I feel like what tends to happen is then when we talk about resilience, we talk about, the resilience of the person against crises, but we put all of the blame or all of the pressure or all of the resilience on the person rather than the governments who are supposed to change those situations and the context so that we don't have to deal with those resilience or vulnerabilities. I don't know much about, the system in Bangladesh, but I would assume, as Sarwat said, that there are quite a few different, disasters such as cyclones and things like that. And I feel like a disaster is a disaster, a crisis is a crisis, and it impacts education almost in the same way. And I feel like, if the system itself in Bangladesh is resilient enough to sustain those crises, I feel like, yeah, some of it might work, but again, I feel like it's not just the person itself or the community itself, but rather the whole context, including the governments and the policymakers and the teachers and the students. So it has to be a resilience, not just at one level, but overall in the system. So yeah. That's my thinking, at least.
Yes, Sarwat, please.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And you're absolutely right. The onus of resilience always falls on the individual. And, we always say that, oh, you have to be strong, you have to be resilient in Bangla, সহনশীল হতে হবে and all of that. But absolutely, and I think that's why these metaphors are important. It's not only about natural disasters, right? We also have like so many daily struggles that children of different like backgrounds face, abuse and environmental toxins, etc. So that thing, that it is not just the burden of the child or even of only of the family to be resilient individuals, but that it also affects, in the long term, it affects the country as well, because these children are going to grow up to be adults who will be working later on. So the government has to provide that system to mitigate these negative circumstances and provide more positive circumstances. Not just the government, but the community also has to be involved. The families also have to be involved. There should be more education regarding this. The teachers have to be involved as well. So absolutely. And I think what you are saying really goes well with the metaphor, the purpose of the metaphor as well, which is that it's not just individual people. It's a collective thing. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, please, Firdaus.
Yes, just to add with Sarwat in terms of the resilience one. So, and Rachel, you have very rightly mentioned that we really wanted to see that whether people have this perception or that understanding of resilience, okay? Because we saw that, I mean, before introducing the concept of resilience, they even could not understand or could not say anything about the resilience, okay? So this is why our purpose was to really make people understand by using the metaphor, the resilience, what it is. Then again, I mean, we also gave emphasis on that the community, then the government, we all have, the society have the responsibility in really, supporting children who are having adverse, experiences in their life. So how can we support them to be resilient? That was our purpose. And in terms of the ECD, Dr. Rasha, you have talked about, absolutely, because, the context is different. Like the metaphor that we tested in Bangladesh, it was tested in different countries. Like it was tested in USA, it was tested in UK, South Africa, and then even in Kenya, right? So, but for us, I mean, we contextualized it in completely in our language, because USA, UK, South Africa, they did it in English. But for us, it was Bangla. The language, the narrative that was used in English is completely different than we use in Bangla, because the articulation of Bangla is different than the articulation of English. So we invested a lot of our time to really make the frame element right. And we piloted it. We went to the community. We tried to see whether they can understand the language that we are using. So it is not only about the metaphor, but also about using the language, and whether they can also, after hearing the narrative that we were sharing with them, whether they can understand it, whether they can comprehend it. So I mean, if you want to, yes, it can be adapted in many countries, but in many contexts, but you have to kind of, invest a lot of your time to contextualize it. And for the values, it's own the values that we believe, because we consult with the different stakeholders, that as a Bangladeshi people, what values we really feel that these are the important values to really convince our policymaker to ensure or to invest in early childhood sector. So then we came up with many values. From there, we selected, I think, 6, and we tested that 6. So values can differ from country to country. So the values probably we hold, other country people may not hold the same value. So you need to understand what is the value of your country people and what is powerful for them, and then use it in narratives and frame it rightly. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I totally agree. I mean, it's like sign language. I mean, it's culturally bound. I mean, we try to use auto translation for sign language, but I mean, it means something totally different from one context to the other. So I totally agree with you. Is that metaphors would really mean different from one context to the other, and then, but the transferability of concept is there. So whatever the context. The metaphor is used in the local context could be used as an approach rather than the specific content of the metaphors. Yes, I totally agree with you, of course. Yeah. So, I mean, we have 15 minutes left. So I would like to open an open discussion where I would like to plan with you on the future activities of the Knowledge Cafe, Samena Knowledge Cafe. During the year 6 sense making meeting, the meeting, people said that they need more out of the Knowledge Cafe. They needed to be more like a community of practice or a professional learning community. They need more of the networking. So we were thinking if later on we can have the Knowledge Cafe split into 2 halves. The first of which is the presentation that would enrich the discussion, and then an open discussion and networking, and where each participant would talk about their own background, their own needs, what they are doing, and then people can get connected and get networked via the platform of the Knowledge Cafe. So people say that you always come with Knowledge Cafe with a preset agenda, and then we come and so it's becoming more like a webinar, but we want it to be more flexible and cafe style, where people have the chance to chat and talk together and get to know each other and share their experiences. So if we can vote, if have what we call a more of a split kind of a knowledge cafes where we can really have a presentation that would enrich the discussion, and the second half would be devoted to networking and connection and sharing professional communities of practice as well. So if you agree, please raise your hand. So how many hands? Yeah, Zahida Batul is using the video. Yes, thank you so. Yes, and Habib, how are you, Habib? Yes, Nasreen. Okay. So it's a sub-regional request. It's a national sub-regional request. Okay, so from now on, all our Knowledge Cafe would have a slot for networking and for professional learning communities, as well as a rich presentation about lessons learned from the Samena region as well. So if you don't have any further questions to ask. Okay, Zahida, yeah, but I like to see your hand live. So that's a better option actually. So if you have any questions before we close. So there is a comment about the linguistic development, yes, from Zahida as well, the linguistic development through metaphors and particularly in the mother tongue and national language is a good way. Thank you so much for your comment, and we totally agree, of course, with that. So please, before you close, I would share here the screen again, and then I would let you know about our future Knowledge Cafe session. It's going to be May, June, July, August. So our next one is in August. So here is the let me share this. So here's again our poster, and big thank you to our wonderful speakers and our wonderful team of researchers behind the scene who has not been able to be here with us today. And kindly follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on the YouTube as well. And the link for the post-event survey is posted in the chat. So it's very important that you give us feedback through the link of the post-event survey. So kindly fill the post-event survey and let us know how did you like today's session? What are the areas of improvement? What would you like to have different next time? And so on. So there is no link for Hannah. There's no link for participation there. Yes, thank you, Yasmina, for sharing that, or for even, yeah. So even, yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's the post-event survey. If you can kindly scan it with your mobile and fill the form. It's a very short survey, but it helps us know really what to be learned. And remember, I mean, the topic of today is resilience and education system resilience and early childhood and metaphor and storytelling and so on. So that when you give your feedback, you relate to the content of the topic of the discussion. It would be helpful more to relate also to thematic priority areas of our work as well. Yeah. Right. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day. Take care. Bye bye.